Chapter 1365. Yes, Jingyu nodded slowly when she heard Qinbai's words. Bang. Qinbai strode forward and slammed his fist on the tea table. He stared at Jingyu with his dark eyes. The impact of his fist on the table caused the tea to spill out. Jingyu's eyes widened slightly. What did he do to you? Jingyu could clearly feel the strong murderous intent in Qinbai's words. This made Jingyu feel very uncomfortable. She looked at the approaching Qinbai and pushed Qinbai away from her. What nonsense are you talking about? Jingyu stood up and kept a distance from Qinbai. She slowly frowned and said, With your brain, do you really think there's something going on between us? Jingyu looked at Qinbai seriously after she finished speaking. Qinbai also looked at her seriously. Qinbai, where's your brain? Jingyu looked at Qinbai and understood what he was thinking. Her mouth twitched and she said, Xuan only helped me get my clothes. He did not see anything. Nothing happened between us. Qinbai's eyes were wide open and he looked at Jingyu. What do you expect from such a young child? Jingyu looked at Qinbai with a conflicted expression and said, Really? Qinbai heard Jingyu's words and slowly breathed a sigh of relief. He said, It's good that you're fine, pig. Jingyu looked at Qinbai and scolded him. She looked calm. She turned around and said, Although nothing happened, now that this has spread to other people's ears, I do not know how ugly it will be. Who knows how ugly it will be? Qinbai heard Jingyu's words and his face suddenly turned ugly. He slowly frowned and said, Who spread this news? I don't know. Jingyu shrugged and said, Do you think I'll let that person live if I know who spread this news? Jingyu said with an evil smile. Qinbai was silent for a moment when he saw the gleam in her eyes. Qinbai took a deep breath and looked at Jingyu seriously and said, I'll deal with this matter. Don't worry. I know. Jingyu nodded calmly and said, I'm not worried at all. Qinbai looked at Jingyu and sighed deeply. Then he turned and left. As for how Qinbai dealt with this matter in the end, Jingyu had no idea and didn't want to know. She only knew that after Qinbai left, Jingyu's news seemed to have encountered something and was strangely suppressed. The next morning, when Jingyu woke up from her sleep, the sky was already bright. It was very lively outside, so Jingyu, who originally planned to continue sleeping for a while, had to get up. Miss you, you're finally up. When Jingyu got up, Qinru heard the commotion outside and quickly walked over. Why is it so lively outside? Jingyu asked Qinru as she rubbed her head. Miss you, have you forgotten? Qinru said with a smile, Today is the day the high priestess is accepting a disciple. She even had someone send clothes over yesterday. Chapter 1366. Oh, I remember now. After hearing Qinru's words, Jingyu followed Qinru's gaze and saw the clothes on the table. She nodded in understanding. Too many things had happened yesterday, causing Jingyu's brain to short-circuit for a moment. Miss Yu, hurry up and dress up. The apprenticeship ceremony is about to begin. Qinru looked very happy. Jingyu had no idea why they were so solemn when Qinbai accepted a disciple. But when she thought of how much Xuan was looking forward to it, she thought, I'll just take it that I'm going to support him. Thinking of this, Jingyu nodded and let Qinru dress her up. The apprenticeship ceremony of the Holy Family was very important to the Holy Family and the High Priest. The ceremony was carried out on the altar of the Holy Family. When Jingyu arrived at the legendary altar, she was stunned by the altar in front of her. On the back mountain of the Holy Family, there was an empty altar that could accommodate more than tens of thousands of people. Now Jingyu and the others were at the altar at the foot of the mountain. Why don't we go up? Jingyu saw that there were people everywhere and it seemed very narrow. She looked at the high altar and asked curiously, It's so small here, and it's so big up there. Why don't we go up? Miss you don't know. Qinru saw Jingyu's gaze and pursed her lips slightly before she said, The altar above is not easy to go up. Jingyu blinked curiously and asked, Only when the high priest is divining the heavens can he go to the high altar, or when the high priest ascends to the throne, or when the high priest ascends to the throne, or when the high priest passes away, or when the high priest ascends to the heavens, can it be held on the high altar. Oh, Jingyu nodded as if she understood. In other words, only when there was a major event that concerned the safety of the saints would his back be opened. But there's one more thing. Qin pursed her lips slightly and said, when the divine punishment is held, the altar will also be opened. What? Jingyu's heart trembled slightly. She frowned slightly when she saw the serious look in Qinru's eyes. If a clansman commits the crime of betraying the clan, he will be brought to the altar and burned by the divine fire. Qinru's eyes flashed with fear as she said, I've only seen it once. It was so scary. Heavenly fire. Jingyu murmured softly, frowning slowly. Miss you look, the high priest is here. Jingyu was in deep thought when Qinru suddenly pulled Jingyu's hand excitedly. Jingyu pursed her lips and looked up. This was the first time Jingyu saw Qinbai dressed in white. The pure white clothes were worn on Qinbai's tall body. He wore a large cloak and a hat on his head. There was a vermilion mole between Qinbai's eyebrows. His pitch-black eyes scanned the surroundings indifferently and finally landed on Jingyu. Jingyu stood in the crowd, also dressed in white and wearing a large hat. Jingyu looked at Qinbai's clothes, then looked down at her own clothes. Her mouth twitched violently. Why the fuck do they want to wear a couple's outfits so much? Jingyu's expression immediately turned cold. She looked up at Qinbai and cursed Qinbai in her heart. Chapter 1367. It was impossible to change now, so the only way was to continue wearing it. Jingyu was unwilling, but when she turned her head slightly, she saw the person who was also standing in the crowd. He was dressed in black and stood there with his hands behind his back. It was as if all the shining points were gathered on him. Xiaochen had always been like this, but, in the past, when Jingyu looked at him like this, Xiaochen would slowly turn his head and smile at Jingyu. Those thin lips, those eyes that were cold to everyone else, were so warm and moving when he looked at her, but now, Xiaochen did not turn his head from the beginning to the end. His eyes were calm, and the corners of his lips were slightly curved downwards. It was as if nothing could make him smile gently no matter how much he looked at her. Her Xiaochen had become like this. Jingyu slowly turned her head, her eyes expressionless. With the arrival of Qinbai, the noisy crowd quieted down. Jingyu realized that Yun Weijun's clothes were the same as hers. Yun Weijun probably realized it herself, but the moment she saw Jingyu, the happy smile on her face froze. Her dark eyes looked at Jingyu and she slowly lowered her head. At this moment, Yun Weijun felt a burning pain on her face. As expected, because Jingyu and Yun Yunyun's clothes were similar, the crowd started pointing at Jingyu and Yun Weijun. Qinru. Jingyu frowned slightly. She turned to Qinru and said, Why are my clothes the same as the Holy Lord's? I don't know. Qinru gulped. Her eyes were filled with panic as she said, The high priest had someone send these clothes over. Could it be that the high priest arranged this? Jingyu heard Qinru's words and the corner of her mouth twitched. She turned to look at Qinbai and saw Qinbai sitting there with a calm face. Obviously, Qinbai knew about the clothes. What the hell is this guy trying to do? Jingyu looked at Qinbai talking slowly. She then looked at Yun Weijun, who was standing where she was. Jingyu felt as if she had made a big scene. Fortunately, that situation did not last long. Xuan was on the stage. Today, Xuan had changed into a very formal outfit. His black clothes made him look very handsome. Jingyu saw Xuan and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. She could tell that this little guy was very nervous. After Xuan came out, he first looked at the situation in front of him. Then he looked at the crowd and casually saw Jingyu standing in the crowd. She was dressed in white and her eyes were so dazzling. Come on. When Jingyu saw Xuan looking at her, there was a faint smile in her eyes. She opened her mouth and mouthed something. Xuan, who was standing on the stage, slowly raised the corner of his lips. He took a deep breath and strode toward Qinbai. He lifted his robe and knelt in front of Qinbai. Then the MC began to read out various things. Jingyu saw the arrival of the elders. Looking at the elders who were invited, Jingyu's face gradually turned cold. There were a total of 7 elders. Chapter 1368. Jing Yu saw many familiar faces among these people. Jing Yu's eyes were cold and filled with murderous intent, especially when she saw the sixth elder, Yanqin. Jing Yu could hardly suppress the murderous intent in her heart. "Miss Yu?" Qing Ru called out worriedly when she noticed Jing Yu's strange behavior. "I'm fine." Jing Yu closed her eyes abruptly. Her chest rose and fell little by little before it gradually calmed down. When she opened her eyes again, there was no change in her expression. Qin Bai, who was sitting on the high seat, saw Jing Yu's reaction. His dark eyes flickered slightly, but he did not say anything in the end. He listened to the announcer's announcement and introduction, and then it was time for the ceremony of the apprenticeship ceremony. There was nothing special during the whole process. Jing Yu stood and watched in boredom until Xuan served the tea. Qin Bai then gave the ceremony. After Xuan took the oath, it was announced that Xuan was the first disciple of Qin Bai. "I'm so tired." Jing Yu sighed deeply and sat down on a stone chair weakly. After standing for so long, these people could really stand. "Sister Yu." Jing Yu was resting on the stone chair when she heard someone calling her. Jing Yu turned her head slightly and saw Xuan running toward her with excitement in his eyes. "Sister Yu, I finally have a master," Xuan said as if he was showing off. Jing Yu looked at Xuan with a faint smile in her eyes. "Are you relieved now?" Jing Yu looked at Xuan and said, "From today onwards, you are the last disciple of the High Priestess. Are you happy now?" Xuan nodded and said, "It's all thanks to Sister Yu." "Ah." Jing Yu laughed and shook her head. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Qin Bai walking over. She raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at Qin Bai standing in front of her. She asked curiously, "Are you done with your business over there?" Qin Bai responded indifferently. Xuan became a little reserved when he saw Qin Bai. He lowered his eyes and called out to Qin Bai. Qin Bai nodded again. He turned his gaze back to Jing Yu and said, "There's a banquet tonight. Remember to be there. Now that there's nothing else, you can go and rest." "That's great." Jing Yu nodded repeatedly when she heard Qin Bai's words. Her eyes were filled with joy. "Xuan, I'll take my leave first. See you tonight." Jing Yu stood up and raised her hand to touch Xuan's head. There was a faint smile in her eyes. Xuan looked at Jing Yu touching his head and suddenly turned his head away uncomfortably. Qin Bai looked at Jing Yu's action and frowned. Finally, he looked at Jing Yu's back and turned to look at Xuan, and Qin Bai pursed his lips slightly and looked at Xuan. "Do you like Sister Jing Yu very much?" Xuan's expression changed when he heard Qin Bai's words. He nodded seriously and said, "Sister Yu is a very good person." Qin Bai looked at Xuan's expression and said slowly, "She will be your wife in the future." Chapter 1369. No one knew what Qin Bai meant when he said this. It sounded like he was telling Xuan something, but at the same time, it sounded like he was warning him. Xuan's expression changed slightly, and then he slowly lowered his head. "Yes, I understand." Xuan lowered his head and slightly increased the strength of his hand as he answered seriously. When Qin Bai saw Xuan agree, he slowly turned around and left. Xuan stood where he was. He lowered his head and did not speak. His dark eyes looked as if he did not want to be left behind. Or perhaps, they were filled with a strange emotion. Jing Yu really went back to her residence to rest. She quietly waited for the arrival of the knight to attend the legendary banquet. The night in the Holy Family's palace was very beautiful. At least Jing Yu thought so. She could not wear the clothes she wore during the day at night. Jing Yu decisively changed her clothes and then went to the banquet. When Jing Yu arrived, there were not many people because it was not time yet. Jing Yu was bored, so she walked around in the corridor. Looking at the buildings of the Holy Family and the palace walls, Jing Yu's eyes became a little deep. When Jing Yu was walking, she unexpectedly bumped into someone when she wanted to go back to the palace. Jing Yu did not want to bump into someone for the time being. Xiao Chen was walking with his hands behind his back. It seemed that he was also wearing summer clothes. Jing Yu came out from a corner. This scene was so familiar. Jing Yu had appeared in front of Xiao Chen countless times and then smiled brightly at Xiao Chen. Jing Yu had been meticulously waiting for those countless coincidental encounters. But this time, they really met by chance. Jing Yu's golden-green eyes slowly glanced at Xiao Chen. She had not greeted Xiao Chen with a smile since then. Jing Yu looked at Xiao Chen indifferently and then lowered her eyes. She did not say a word and just brushed past him. She seemed like a stranger, but also like. The moment he saw Jing Yu, Xiao Chen unconsciously stopped. He saw Jing Yu's golden-green eyes. In Jing Yu's eyes, he seemed to have disappeared in an instant. In the past, she only had eyes for him. Jing Yu did not smile anymore. She said happily, "What a coincidence." And just like that, she turned around and left. It was so clean and neat that it made Xiao Chen feel uncomfortable. Xiao Chen turned around slightly and glanced at Jing Yu's departing figure. The expression in his eyes deepened little by little until he heard a soft call in his ear. "Xiao Chen? Why are you still here?" Nailin Yu, who had come from another direction, looked at Xiao Chen with a coquettish expression. Xiao Chen slowly lowered his eyes and turned around to leave without saying a word. Nailin Yu looked at Xiao Chen's actions and the smile on her face stiffened a little. Then, it bloomed again. As if she did not care at all, she followed behind Xiao Chen and walked towards the palace banquet. By the time Xiao Chen returned, the palace banquet had already started for a while. Jing Yu and the others had already sat down. Yun Weijun had also changed her clothes. She wore the same clothes together and changed her clothes together. Such a scene fell into the eyes of everyone. Suddenly, everyone looked at Yun Weijun with even more strange expressions. Yun Weijun held the wine cup tightly in her hand and lowered her head without saying a word. Chapter 1370. The arrival of Qin Bai and Zwen attracted everyone's attention. Everyone congratulated them and Qin Bai also smiled. Zwen was a little reserved but fortunately, Qin Bai and the others were there to accompany him. The banquet could be said to be very smooth but halfway through, Jing Yu discovered that Qingru had disappeared. "Have you seen Qingru?" Jing Yu brought Qingru and another maid to the banquet today. Now that Qingru had disappeared, Jing Yu frowned slightly. "Sister Qingru said that she went outside to get something for you." The maid lowered her head slightly and said, "Get something? When did I ask her to get something?" When Jing Yu heard the maid's words, she immediately frowned and a strange light flashed in her eyes. She looked around and suddenly discovered that Nailin Yu, who was originally here, had disappeared. Not good. Jing Yu's eyes flashed with surprise. She suddenly stood up and walked outside. When the maid saw that Jing Yu was about to leave without saying a word, she anxiously called out, Miss Yu, where are you going?" "You stay here and watch. I'll be back soon," Jing Yu said to the maidservant, then turned around and left. The maidservant stood in place with a conflicted expression on her face. She looked at the scene around her, but she still forced herself to stay. After Jing Yu left the hall, she followed the corridor and walked down. When she reached the bottom, she asked the guard for directions. She then followed the corridor and continued to walk forward. In her heart she thought, "This Nailin Yu can't be up to something again, right?" Jing Yu frowned slightly. Just as she was thinking, she suddenly saw a figure flash by. Jing Yu's expression turned cold and she followed. Just as Jing Yu was about to follow, she suddenly felt an overwhelming murderous aura attack Jing Yu. Jing Yu's expression turned ugly. Her eyes flashed slightly and she suddenly turned her body, dodging the long sword that was thrusting towards her. When Jing Yu stood still again, she saw 4 or 5 people surrounding Jing Yu. "Who are you people? How dare you behave so atrociously in the territory of the Holy Family?" Jing Yu looked at the people in front of her with a cold expression and shouted, "Ha!" Just as Jing Yu finished speaking, she suddenly heard a familiar laugh. "Jing Yu, this is my gift to you. Accept it properly." Nailin Yu's eyes were tinged with a faint smile. Nailin Yu, who was dressed in red, was standing not too far away. This caused Jing Yu's expression to become even uglier. "That little maid of yours?" Nailin Yue opened her mouth again and said, "She's in the room over there. She's really loyal. I told her to put poison in your food, but she refused. Now that she's poisoned herself, I wonder if you can save her?" "Nailin Yu." When Jing Yu heard Nailin Yu's words, her expression became even more tyrannical. Why did she always implicate the people around her? Ha! Enjoy! Nalan Yu laughed loudly and then indifferently turned around and left. Jing Yu looked at Nalan Yu's departing footsteps and suddenly took a step forward. Before she could make a move, the 5 people surrounding Jing Yu suddenly rushed forward. Jing Yu had no choice but to stop and fight with the 5 people. These 5 people clearly didn't want to kill Jing Yu and just kept pestering Jing Yu. Jing Yu thought about what Nalan Yu had said. Chapter 1371. Qin Ru. Jing Yu's eyes turned cold and her golden-green eyes shone brightly. Under Jing Yu's gaze, the poisonous snakes that were originally hiding in the darkness slowly crawled out. When the 5 men in black saw Jing Yu's actions, their faces were filled with shock. When Jing Yu saw that no one was stunned, her lips curled up into a cold smile and she said, "You're not going to kill me. I will kill you all." As soon as Jing Yu finished speaking, the dagger in her hand suddenly attacked. She no longer used a roundabout tactic. Instead, she attacked directly. The poisonous snakes that were controlled by Jing Yu also took advantage of the opening, and the hissing sound made everyone's hair stand on end. Retreat! When the men saw that they couldn't hold on any longer and wanted to retreat, how could Jing Yu give them the chance? "You want to leave now? Isn't it a little too late?" Jing Yu's golden-green eyes flashed with a strong light and the 5 men's faces changed drastically. Hissing sounds could be heard and countless poisonous snakes crawled out from the grass. Ah! After a scream, Jing Yu suddenly stepped forward and casually swiped the dagger in her hand and took a life. When there was a first, there would be a second. Jing Yu worked with the poisonous snakes and quickly finished off the 5 men in front of her. Looking at the 5 corpses lying on the ground, Jing Yu slowly let out a sigh of relief. She squatted down and watched the poisonous snakes leave once again. Then, she quickly turned around and rushed into the house. Qin Ru. When Jing Yu rushed into the house, she saw Qin Ru lying on the ground with messy hair and a pale face. "Miss Yu." Qin Ru saw Jing Yu and her eyes were filled with shock. "How are you? Did Nalan Yu poison you? Where's the antidote?" Jing Yu looked at Qin Ru anxiously and asked. "Poison?" Qin Ru said in confusion. "I don't know anything. I was knocked out and brought here. I just woke up. What happened?" "What?" Jing Yu's eyes widened when she heard Qin Ru's words. She lifted her head to look at the room in front of her. When her gaze landed on the incense burner, her expression changed drastically. "Let's go." Jing Yu stood up to leave without a second thought. However, the moment she stood up, Jing Yu felt dizzy. This feeling was abnormal pupils. Someone drugged her. Jing Yu's expression quickly changed. At this moment, Jing Yu heard the sound of footsteps coming from the entrance. She immediately turned her head and saw Nalan Yina. Behind Nalan Yina were many people. "Nalan Yu, it really is you." Jing Yu looked at Nalan Yu with a vicious glint in her eyes. "So what if it's me?" Nalan Yu looked at Jing Yu, who was on the verge of collapsing. She smiled happily and said, "How do you feel now? I heard that this medicine greatly suppresses abnormal pupils. You forcefully used it just now. You must be feeling terrible right now, right?" When Jing Yu heard Nalan Yu's words, her body slightly stiffened, but she remained silent. "I can't wait. Let's do it." Nalan Yu looked at Jing Yu and smiled. "Do you know what I want to see the most? I want to see you lose your reputation and be spurned by everyone." Chapter 1372. Back then, I was hated by everyone because of my different pupils. Now, Jing Yu's eyes were filled with a faint smile. She looked at Jing Yu and said, "Now, I want you to be called a slut by everyone." "Nalan Yu, you're so ruthless." Jing Yu heard Nalan Yu's words. Although she had expected this, Jing Yu's face still turned pale when she heard Nalan Yu's words. "Do it." Nalan Yu saw that Jing Yu was getting weaker and coldly said, The man behind Nalan Yu replied. When he stepped forward, Qin Ru quickly stood in front of Jing Yu. Jing Yu saw Qin Ru's actions and her heart felt warm. She said, "Qin Ru, when I shout, take the chance to run." "Lady Yu." Qin Ru heard Jing Yu's words and her eyes were filled with shock. "Find someone to save me." Jing Yu smiled at Qing Ru as if she was laughing. Qing Ru saw Jing Yu's smile and her eyes filled with tears. Run! Jing Yu used all the strength in her body to shout these words when Nailin Yu and the other pets rushed over. She raised her hand and pushed Qing Ru out of the way. She slammed her body into Nailin Yu and knocked her away. Qing Ru successfully rushed out because those people were all focused on catching Jing Yu. Young miss? Nailin Yu looked at Qing Ru, who was running for her life, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. The people beside her were about to chase after her when Nailin Yu slowly raised her hand to stop them. She happily said, "Let him go and report." But when the guard heard Nailin Yu's words, there was a trace of unease in his eyes. "Don't worry." Nailin Yu faintly smiled. The corners of her mouth raised made people's hair stand on end. She slowly said, "This is probably the last thing she will say." Jing Yu was restrained by the crowd. When she heard Nailin Yu's words, her expression changed. She glared at Nailin Yu and said, "Nailin Yu, I will make you wish you were dead." "Ha, I'll wait." Nailin Yu looked at Jing Yu and smiled proudly. She waved her hand and said, "Serve her well." The underling dragged the powerless Jing Yu into the room. In the room, there was already a man lying on the bed. Jing Yu's eyes were filled with disgust. There was a strange smell in the room. The more Jing Yu breathed in this smell, the weaker her body became. After those people threw Jing Yu on the bed and reached out to take off her clothes, Jing Yu suddenly used all her strength to shake off their hands. Scram! Jing Yu's fierce eyes caused the two people's expressions to change. Then, as if they were enraged, the hands that reached for Jing Yu did not stop. One of them grabbed onto Jing Yu while the other viciously tore off Jing Yu's clothes. Revealing her snow-white skin, Jing Yu's eyes in the mirror were almost completely red. Her eyes were filled with a strong sense of viciousness. "Get over here. I'm going to kill all of you." Jing Yu struggled incomparably. Even her words were powerless. "There is not much time left. Let's go." Because of Jing Yu's struggle, that person was unable to take off all of Jing Yu's clothes. However, this was already enough. Before they left, those people took off the man's clothes. Chapter 1373. Then, they carried the incense burner away. Jing Yu watched as the two men turned and left, closing the door behind them. Jing Yu's consciousness began to blur. The tightness in her chest caused Jing Yu's expression to gradually turn cold. Jing Yu looked at the situation in front of her, then at the man's slightly relaxed gaze. She propped herself up and looked at the hairpin on the table. The dagger had already been snatched away. Jing Yu looked at the hairpin and moved over to hold it in her hand. "Where is this place?" The man opened his eyes, which were filled with confusion. He sized up the situation in front of him and looked at Jing Yu in shock. The man looked at Jing Yu's torn clothes and then lowered his head to look at his own clothes. Suddenly, his eyes revealed an incomparably shocked expression. "Shut up." Jing Yu looked at the man and spat out these words. She felt dizzy and almost fell to the ground. The hairpin in her hand stabbed into her leg without hesitation. This action of hers without hesitation caused the man to reveal a look of astonishment. The intense pain caused Jing Yu to sober up a little. However, Jing Yu noticed that the man seemed to be acting strangely. The gaze that he looked at Jing Yu gradually became more intense. "It seems that you have to die." Originally, Jing Yu didn't want to kill this man. However, after seeing the change in his eyes, Jing Yu's eyes suddenly revealed a strong killing intent. Almost at the same time that the man moved, she jumped onto the bedding and stabbed the hairpin in her hand into his throat. Bright red blood splattered onto Jing Yu's face. Her hands were covered in blood. Her own blood and the man's blood on her legs spread out. Jing Yu's expression was cold, without any warmth. "Jing Yu." Just as Jing Yu pulled out the hairpin, there was the sound of panicked footsteps outside the door. Jing Yu turned her head slightly and looked in the direction of the door. The door, which was originally tightly shut, was pushed open in an instant. Qin Bai's figure rushed in at this moment. There were many people following behind him, including Xiao Chen and Nailin Yu. Everyone who rushed in was stunned by the scene in front of them. The woman whose hands were covered in blood was holding a hairpin. Her body was covered in blood and her clothes were barely covering her body. Now, Jingyu was kneeling on the body of a man who was already dead. Jingyu? Qin Bai looked at the scene in front of him with his eyes wide open. Nailin Yu originally came in with the mood of watching a good show. But when she saw the bloody scene in front of her, she was also shocked. Nailin Yu looked at Jingyu's trembling appearance as she got off the bed. Her heart trembled slightly. Everyone was looking at Jingyu, but in Jingyu's eyes, there was only Xiaochen. This scene was extremely familiar. Back in the Tokyo Imperial City, Jingyu was also kidnapped by Jingyu and locked in a brothel. Then, like this, Jingyu used a rusty hatchet to kill everyone. At that time, Xiaochen also arrived. Jingyu could relax her body and lean into Xiaochen's embrace. But now, Jingyu tightly held the hairpin in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on Xiaochen. Suddenly, her heart was filled with sorrow. Chapter 1374. Finally, Xiaochen, are you no longer my pillar of support? Jingyu's eyes were fixed on Xiaochen. Then, as everyone held their breaths, Jingyu's body slowly fell to one side. The moment Jingyu's body fell, Xiaochen's body trembled violently. His feet unconsciously moved a little. In his heart, he had the urge to rush over and catch Jingyu, but in the end he didn't move. Because someone was one step faster than him. Qin Bai caught Jingyu's limp body. His eyes were bloodshot. Quick! Call for a doctor! Quick! Qin Bai's heart-wrenching roar was the last thing Jingyu heard. At this moment, Jingyu's eyes suddenly welled up with hot tears. Why was the person who saved her in the end Qin Bai? Not him. This day's events almost instantly spread throughout the Holy Family. Everyone believed that Jingyu had already been tainted by another man. How could such an unclean holy maiden be worthy of being the holy maiden? There was a wave of questioning and condemnation. Just as Nailin Yu said, Jingyu became a slut. Jingyu fell into a coma. No one knew where to start looking for signs of her being drugged. Qin Bai used his authority as the high priest to suppress the rumors. Until the moment Jingyu woke up, Qin Bai stayed by her side. Jingyu was lying on the bed at the top of the curtains. Her eyes were wide open as she stared at the top of the curtains. Jingyu, you're awake? When Qin Bai turned to leave, he saw Jingyu open her eyes and stare at the curtains. A look of surprise appeared in his eyes. Where's Qingru? Jingyu opened her eyes. She seemed to have thought of something. She frowned slightly and turned to look at Qin Bai. When Qin Bai heard Jingyu's question, his expression changed. His dark eyes made Jingyu's heart suddenly shrink. She sat up abruptly. Qin Bai saw Jingyu's movements and quickly went to support Jingyu. Where's Qingru? Jingyu once again stared at Qin Bai and asked. Did? Qin Bai's lips moved slightly as he said these two words. Jingyu's body suddenly froze. Nailin Yu. Jingyu's eyes suddenly turned red. The cold words that came out of her mouth made Qin Bai purse his lips tightly. After Qingru told us the news, she died of poison. We couldn't save her. Jingyu slowly lowered her head. Her hands, which were by her side, tightly gripped the bedsheets beneath her. What exactly happened? Qin Bai looked at Jingyu and took a deep breath before asking. You still don't know what happened? Jingyu's lips curled up in a mocking smile. She looked at Qin Bai and said, this was all Nailin Yu's trick. She finally got what she wanted, didn't she? Jingyu? Qin Bai looked at Jingyu's face. His eyes flashed with helplessness. I'm tired. Jingyu slowly lay down again and said, Qingru, help me give her a proper burial. After that, no matter what Qin Bai said, Jingyu ignored him. She closed her eyes tightly and didn't say anything. Jingyu wasn't completely unaware of what had happened outside. After all, she had fallen into the Holy Family. She had already seen through life and death. Chapter 1375. Jingyu smiled self-mockingly. Only Qin Bai would protect her regardless of the consequences. How ironic. Thinking of this, Jingyu thought of what happened that night. She saw Xiaochen's calm eyes. He was the man she had relied on all her life. What? Why could she no longer rely on him? Jing Yu curled up on the bed and suppressed the heat in her eyes. Holy maiden, it's time to take the medicine. Just as Jing Yu closed her eyes, she heard a strange voice. Jing Yu's body trembled slightly and she turned her head to look. The person who called her Miss Yu, Qing Ru, was no longer there. Jing Yu didn't know who replaced her. At this time, she was standing carefully by the bed, holding a bowl of medicine in her hand and looking at Jing Yu. Put down the medicine and go out. Jing Yu didn't even have the thought of asking for her name. After saying this coldly, she turned her head away again. Seeing Jing Yu's action, the maid's body stiffened slightly. She seemed to want to say something but didn't dare to. She silently put down the medicine bowl in her hand and carefully left. Jing Yu was still recuperating in the attic. Outside the attic, there was an earth-shattering commotion. I said that she is my wife. No matter what happens, it will never change. In the highest decision-making place of the Holy Family, Qin Bai, dressed in a priest's robe, sat high on the first seat. Yun Weijun sat beside Qin Bai. Below him sat a group of elders. At this time, the atmosphere in the hall was so tense that everyone's face was full of anger. High Priest, how can such an unclean woman be worthy of the Holy Family's future? The elders below him all had dissatisfaction in their eyes. Such an unclean woman. Not only did she have a dubious relationship with Swan, but she also got naked with a man in front of everyone. She has tarnished the reputation of our Holy Family. Everyone said, I've heard that this saintess has been wandering outside. Her murderous aura is extremely strong. She hates our Holy Family to the core. If such a person enters our Holy Family, won't she destroy our Holy Family completely? Absolutely not. Enough. Just as the elders were strongly objecting, Qin Bai suddenly raised his hand and fiercely slammed it on the chair beneath him. His eyes were filled with anger as he coldly looked at everyone and said, You have no right to comment on this sovereign's decision. If you want to make a move on Jing Yu, then wait until I'm no longer the high priest of the Holy Family. After Qin Bai's cold words, he suddenly stood up and left, ignoring everyone's expression. He walked towards Jing Yu's attic. In the past few days, all the negative comments about Jing Yu had been suppressed by Qin Bai's strong means, and now the elders were doing the same. Qin Bai's strength made the elders dissatisfied. Sacred leader, look. Seeing Qin Bai leave like that, the elders who were still sitting in their seats felt embarrassed. They all looked at Yun Weijun and started to whisper to each other. Sacred leader, look at this. Seeing Qin Bai leave, the elders who were still sitting in their seats felt embarrassed. They all looked at Yun Weijun and started to talk. The high priest must have been bewitched by that demoness. The elders' eyes were full of anger. Among them, the sixth elder, Yenchen, sneered and said, The saintess is a great evil person. She has no mercy on the people of our Holy Family. Chapter 1376. Do you still remember the precepts of the Holy Family? Great evildoers must be eliminated. Yen Chen's eyes were filled with hatred. He lowered his head to look at his feet and clenched his fists. Back then, his 4 limbs had been crippled and he was already in danger when he was brought back to the sacred race. However, he was faced with a choice during the treatment. If he saved his feet first, his hands would be destroyed. If he saved his hands first, his feet would be destroyed. Because the delay was too long, now he was faced with such a cruel choice. In the end, Yen Chen chose to save his hands first. This also led to Yen Chen being in a wheelchair from then on. He could no longer stand up and walk. Everyone, please calm down. Just as the elders were talking, Yun Weijun, who was sitting at the top, suddenly stood up slowly and said, Since he is a great evildoer of the Holy Family, naturally he must be eliminated. As for how to eliminate him, we may need to think about it carefully. Yun Weijun smiled faintly and said, The high priest has his own judgment. Please don't be anxious. Holy Lord. When the elders heard Yun Weijun's words, their faces suddenly showed dissatisfaction. However, Yun Weijun didn't say much. He just smiled and then left. After so many years, the Holy Lord had always listened to the high priest. It was the same today. It was really worrying. Holy Lord? Seeing that the meeting inside was over, Yun Wei-jun also came out at this time. There was no change in his clear eyes. The guard standing on the side hurried to greet him. When he was about to speak, he saw that Yun Wei-jun's face was so ugly. At this time, Yun Wei-jun's eyes were full of coldness. His hands were almost tearing the cuffs of his sleeves. The guard on the side looked at Yun Wei-jun's gloomy face and suddenly swallowed in fear. He silently retreated behind Yun Wei-jun. When Jingyu heard the door open, she knew that it must be Qinbai. Who else would run to her room so diligently? Jingyu looked at Qinbai's gloomy eyes and calmly raised her eyebrows as she asked Qinbai, "What's wrong?" "I'm fine." When Qinbai saw Jingyu, his expression turned solemn for a moment. Then, his expression softened as he looked at Jingyu and asked, "How are your injuries?" "I'm fine." Jingyu replied nonchalantly. She turned her head and said, "How's your investigation going this time? Who are those men in black? How could such a huge commotion be carried out in the sacred race's imperial palace without anyone noticing? Even Nailin Yu doesn't have such great ability, right?" Jingyu sneered and said, "There are so many people who can't wait for me to die. I'll find out. During this time, stay here and recuperate. Don't run around." Qinbai looked at Jingyu and said, "I'm here. I won't let anything happen to you." "Qinbai, why do you have to do this?" When Jingyu heard Qinbai's words, her heart trembled slightly. She turned to look at Qinbai and said, "I won't stay in the Holy Family. The hatred between me and the Holy Family can't be resolved. You don't have to do such a useless thing." Qinbai looked at Jingyu silently. Jingyu's expression didn't change. Chapter 1377. Have a good rest. Qinbai stood up and said to Jingyu. Before he left, he said to the guard outside, "Take good care of the Saintess. If anything happens to her, you can bring your head to me." Jingyu listened to Qinbai's footsteps as he left. Her lips curled into a cold smile. To put it bluntly, he was just putting her under house arrest. In the next few days, Jingyu recovered day by day. Zuan came to visit Jingyu once, but it seemed that he was too busy with his studies to leave. Jingyu looked at Zuan's eager expression and knew that this little fellow was bent on learning well. Jingyu was relieved. However, what made her very unhappy was that Xiaochen did not appear even once after so many days. Just when Jingyu was feeling very vexed, she received a piece of news. The 9th Emperor was returning to his country. "What did you say?" Jingyu was sitting in her room, reading a book in her hand. When she heard the news from the maid, the book in her hand slipped from her hand. Her eyes were filled with shock. The maid had said a lot earlier. When she saw Jingyu's anxious expression, she immediately swallowed her saliva and said, "The High Priestess has left the High Priestess Palace temporarily due to an urgent matter. She is going down the mountain now." The maid thought carefully for a moment. The Saintess's reaction must be because of the High Priestess. "I'm not asking you about this. I'm asking you about Xiaochen's leaving." Jingyu raised her hand to stop the maid from speaking. Her pair of golden-green eyes shone faintly as she stared at the maid and asked. The maid nodded slowly and said, "The 9th Emperor will be leaving in a few days. I heard that he has signed a contract with the High Priestess. Since he has achieved his goal, he said that he will be leaving." "Damn it." Jingyu's expression changed rapidly. Then, under the maid's shocked gaze, she suddenly stood up. "Saintess, where are you going?" When the maid saw Jingyu getting up and putting on her clothes, she became anxious and said, "The High Priestess said that the Saintess is not allowed to go out without permission before he returns. Get lost." Jingyu mercilessly pushed the maid away and strode out of the attic. Her heart was filled with anxiety. How can Xiaochen leave without a word? The matter wasn't over yet, and what needed to be said hadn't been made clear yet. Xiaochen can't leave. Jingyu looked at the people who tried to stop her and mercilessly knocked out the 2 people guarding the door. Then, she quickly ran down the attic. The wound on her thigh was still throbbing. The wound had not recovered fully after so many days. Jingyu did not care about this at all. She ran straight to Xiaochen's residence. This time, Jingyu barged into Xiaochen's room without any obstruction. She saw that Xiao Chen had just put on his clothes. "You're leaving?" Jing Yu did not say anything. Instead, she threw a question at him. Xiao Chen looked at Jing Yu's messy clothes and frowned slightly. He replied in a neutral tone. "Xiao Chen, tell me, what kind of person am I in your eyes?" Jing Yu looked at Xiao Chen in silence for a long time. Then she slowly spat out these words. Her eyes were filled with sorrow. She never thought that there would be a day when she would be so lowly. Chapter 1378. In front of Xiao Chen, in front of the person she loved the most. "Have you forgotten the oath you made, everything you did?" Jing Yu's heart trembled. She looked at Xiao Chen's expressionless face. His dark eyes made Jing Yu take a deep breath. "Xiao Chen, I'm really tired." Jing Yu's eyes were filled with exhaustion. She quietly looked at Xiao Chen for a long time. Xiao Chen didn't say a word. Jing Yu slowly lowered her eyes. Finally, she turned around and walked towards the door. However, when she reached the door of the courtyard, she saw countless people standing outside. The people at the front were Yun Weijun and Nailin Yu. Jing Yu looked at the two people who had appeared. Her eyes widened slightly. Then, a look of surprise appeared on her face. Looking at Nailin Yu and Yun Weijun, something seemed to explode in her mind. Jing Yu felt as if something was stuck in her throat. "Ha!" Jing Yu suddenly laughed. Her eyes flashed with laughter, causing Nailin Yu and Yun Weijun, who were standing in their original positions, to feel strange in their hearts. They didn't seem to understand why Jing Yu was still laughing at this moment. "This is your plan?" Jing Yu's golden-green eyes flashed with a cold light. Women with different pupils are naturally cruel and inhumane. They are unchaste and unclean. They are evil people. According to the laws of our holy family, they should be burned with heavenly fire to burn their sins. Jing Yu heard Yun Weijun's words with her own ears. Her face suddenly bloomed with a smile. "This is what you have been planning?" Jing Yu's eyes were filled with amusement. She slowly shook her head and stood in place without moving. "Take her away." Yun Weijun looked at Jing Yu without the slightest change in her eyes. She waved her hand and the people behind her stepped forward. They held Jing Yu's hands and feet and took her away. Jing Yu slightly turned her head back to look at the courtyard. The courtyard's door was closed. Xiao Chen still hadn't appeared. The last bit of hope in Jing Yu's eyes was completely extinguished at this moment. She lowered her head and allowed these people to take her away. The entire Holy Family Palace was shaken. The large altar that was closed all year round opened its door today. On the stone steps, Jing Yu was dressed in white. Her hands were tied and she was taken to the altar step by step. While Jing Yu was walking on the stone steps, a deafening bell rang in the sacred race's palace. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked surprised. "What's that sound?" Zuern was studying in his room at this time. When he suddenly heard the sound of the bell, a puzzled look appeared in his eyes. It was not until he heard the sound of the bell that he turned his head to look at the person beside him and asked, "What is it?" But when he turned his head, he found that the manservant beside him looked extremely solemn at this moment. "What's wrong?" Zuern looked at the manservant's expression and asked curiously. "Young master, the large altar has opened." The manservant quickly lowered his head and said, "I don't know what has happened." "Who is being executed?" "They actually used the large altar." "What?" Zuan's expression changed slightly. After staying in the Holy Family Palace for so long, Zuern couldn't be considered as Qin Bai's disciple if he didn't know about the large altar. But when he suddenly heard this, Zuern was still surprised. Chapter 1379. Isn't the high priest required to be present when the altar is opened? Zuan's mind quickly changed. He looked at the servant and asked, "Master should have gone down the mountain by now. Why would he suddenly open the altar?" "I don't know." The servant was also puzzled. When he heard Zuan's question, he shook his head and replied, "Let's go and take a look." Zuan thought for a moment. He put down the book in his hand and walked out. The other people in the palace also put down their work and walked towards the altar. Xiao Chen was sitting in the room. When he heard the sound of the bell, he was puzzled. He thought for a moment. When he was about to call someone in, the door was suddenly pushed open. Nailin Yu walked in gracefully. "Why you here?" Xiao Chen looked at Nailin Yu. He frowned slightly and turned his head. "I missed you so I came." Nailin Yu winked at Xiao Chen. However, Xiao Chen ignored her expressionlessly. He slowly turned his head and said, "What was that sound? Did something happen to the Holy Family?" "Nothing." Nailin Yu smiled slowly. She looked at Xiao Chen and said, "I heard that you weren't feeling well these few days, so I brought some medicine for you." Xiao Chen looked at the medicine bottle that Nailin Yu had placed on the table. He didn't know why, but when he looked at the medicine bottle, Xiao Chen felt a sense of disgust. He frowned and said, "I'm fine, I don't need to take medicine." Xiao Chen, "Don't be willful." Nailin Yu looked at Xiao Chen helplessly and said, "I got this from the people of Miracle Physician Valley. Weren't you weak a moment ago? You'll be fine after taking this medicine." When Xiao Chen heard Nailin Yu's words, he was silent for a moment. He silently reached out and took the medicine. When Nailin Yu saw Xiao Chen's action, a smile appeared on her face. She seemed to be very happy. "Did you do what happened at the apprenticeship ceremony?" Just as Nailin Yu was starting to feel happy, Xiao Chen suddenly spat out such a sentence, causing Nailin Yu's expression to quickly change. "How is that possible?" Nailin Yu was very surprised. She waved her hand and said, "This is the Holy Family. No matter how strong I am, I don't have the ability to make a move here. Also, why would I make a move against the Holy Maiden? If possible, I would like to get closer to the Holy Maiden. If I can convince the Holy Maiden to come out, then wouldn't the Tokyo matter be solved?" Nailin Yu said with sincerity. "Is that so?" Xiao Chen's eyes slightly drooped as he inexplicably spat out these two words. This caused Nailin Yu's expression to quickly change. Then, when Xiao Chen looked up, she instantly recovered. "Naturally." Nailin Yu firmly nodded her head. Xiao Chen's pitch-black eyes stared straight at Nailin Yu. When Nailin Yu was stared at by Xiao Chen's pitch-black eyes, she felt as if all her thoughts were being seen through. That kind of guilty conscience made Nailin Yu's heart almost stop. "Oh." After Xiao Chen faintly said this word, he stood up and slowly walked into the room. Nailin Yu looked at Xiao Chen's back and slowly let out a sigh of relief. She was a little frightened as she touched her chest. Her heart was beating fast. When Nailin Yu walked to the door, she slightly turned around and looked at the closed door behind her. Chapter 1380. There was only one thought in her mind. After dealing with Jingyu, she absolutely couldn't stay here for long. She had to hurry back. She didn't know why, but Xiao Chen's expression had been very strange these past few days. That kind of strange feeling even made Nailin Yu feel as if Xiao Chen had escaped their control. This kind of feeling was very bad. Nailin Yu took a deep breath, turned around, and quickly left. As long as Jingyu died, everything would be over. She absolutely couldn't let Jingyu leave the Holy Family. She absolutely couldn't let Xiao Chen know about this. Otherwise, everything that she had meticulously planned for so long would all collapse. Not long after Nailin Yu left, the door to Xiao Chen's room opened. Xiao Chen, dressed in black, was standing at the door. He was holding Nailin Yu's medicine bottle in his hand. He slightly lowered his eyes and looked at the medicine in his hand. His eyebrows slightly wrinkled, and he poured out a few pills and threw them to the side of the grass. The cat that was squatting on the roof suddenly jumped down and opened its mouth to eat the pills. Then it meowed a few times and ran away. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. Xiao Chen looked at the cat that ran away. His eyes slightly narrowed, and then he expressionlessly placed the medicine bottle in his hand on the table and walked outside. On the altar, everyone's eyes were looking at the person on the altar. In the center of the altar, there was a circular altar with countless firewood. On top of the firewood pile, Jingyu was tied to a wooden stake. The woman in white was tied up with a pitch-black rope around Jingyu's body. The altar was surrounded by firewood, and her pair of golden-green eyes slowly scanned the surroundings. Jingyu's eyes flickered with a cold glint as she watched more and more people gather around her. In front of Jingyu, Jingyu saw the people who had appeared. The elders appeared one by one, and then Yun Weijun and Nailin Yu. There were also countless people watching below. Many pairs of eyes were looking at Jingyu. Under the gazes of those people, Jingyu could clearly see the disgust in their eyes. Jingyu looked at the people sitting on the altar. She finally understood why these people couldn't wait to make a move on Jingyu. Looking at those people's faces, Jingyu thought of when she came out today. The words that the maid beside her said. Qin Bai had gone down the mountain. If Jingyu guessed correctly, someone must have deliberately led Qin Bai away. As for the news that Xiao Chen was going to leave, Jingyu's eyes fell on Nailin Yu, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. Who else but Nailin Yu could understand Jingyu so well? Xiao Chen had just said that he was going to leave. Jingyu couldn't help but think. Maybe Jingyu was originally in the attic, and these elders didn't have the opportunity or reason to break in. Now that Jingyu had stepped out of the attic because of Xiao Chen, she was directly taken away by these people. They were also in the process of cleaning up. What a good plan. Jingyu's eyes revealed a deep smile. She slowly turned her eyes and looked at Yun Weijun, who was sitting at the head of the table. At this moment, Jingyu understood that Yun Weijun must have been involved in all of this. Perhaps Yun Weijun had planned it all. When Jingyu was summoned to the main heart pavilion for questioning, Yun Weijun's humble appearance that day was actually just to mislead Jingyu. Was Yun Weijun a suspicious and trustworthy person? Chapter 1381. Obviously, Jingyu didn't take Yun Weijun seriously, but she didn't expect that this would be a variable. The daughter of the Holy Family, with different pupils, but after the golden bell fell, the huge altar fell silent. Yun Weijun personally stood up, as if she was reading out Jingyu's crimes, exposing Jingyu's past one by one. The child of the Holy Virgin who escaped had already married someone in the secular world, and even attacked the elders of the Holy Family. In the end, all these things were like fresh blood cutting Jingyu's heart. Jingyu listened to those words and laughed out loud. She didn't know why, but she laughed until tears came out. Father, your daughter is unfilial. Jingyu slightly raised her head to look at the void. At this moment, listening to the cries of murder under the altar, Jingyu's heart was only filled with a strong sense of unwillingness. Her enemy was living a peaceful life, but she had fallen into such a situation. Father Jingyu clenched her fists tightly. She slowly lowered her eyes and looked at Yan Chen on the high platform. Even if Jingyu's face turned to ashes, she would still remember it. Yan Chen sat on the high platform and looked at her with a mocking smile, which made Jingyu's expression turn ugly in an instant. Kill her. Kill her. How can an unchaste person like her be the Holy Virgin of the Holy Family? Burn her. Such an evil person can't be left in the world to harm people. Kill her and burn her. The harsh words rang in Jingyu's ears. Jingyu slowly turned her head to look at the crowd. She suddenly felt endless sorrow for herself. Why did she have such thoughts before? Why did she think that these people were innocent? Why did she think that she didn't want to kill these people? These people, what was the difference between these people and them? The Holy Family, the Holy Family. Jingyu's mind was filled with the cries of murder. As she listened, Jingyu suddenly laughed loudly. The laughter seemed to be filled with endless mockery and monstrous killing intent. Kill, kill. Jingyu slowly raised her head to look at the people sitting on the high platform. Her golden-green eyes flashed with the killing intent of the armed police. She slowly said, "If you don't kill me today, in the future, I, Jingyu, will definitely destroy your Holy Family. Demon. You're a demon who's so important to kill. Elders, please preside over the heavens ritual. Kill this evildoer." After hearing Jingyu's words, Yan Chen's words, Yu's father's words. But the person sitting in the first position was obviously the first elder. When he heard Jingyu's words and Yan Chen's words, he immediately raised his hand and shouted, "Elders, please help this old man. Lord Holy Lord, please give the order. Execute." Yun Weijun looked at the elders, slowly raised his hand, and coldly gave such an order. "Sister Yu." At this moment, Jingyu was ready to die. However, at the last moment, Jingyu saw as one who was struggling to push through the crowd. His small face was full of panic. Jing Yu looked at Swatan, who was rushing in her direction with all his might. Her eyes suddenly filled with jealousy. Chapter 1382. Stop it. All of you, stop it. Sister Yu is not a demon. Stop it. Zhuan's heart-wrenching screams were insignificant compared to the tens of thousands of people who were shouting for them to be burned to death. However, Jing Yu heard them loud and clear. So there were still people here who did not want her to die. The corners of Jing Yu's mouth slowly curled up. When she lowered her eyes, a thought suddenly crossed her mind. Where would she go after she died this time? If she could start over again, Jing Yu slowly raised her eyes and looked into the distance. On the stone steps, Jing Yu saw the figure that Jing Yu missed so much. His black robe made him look so cold, as if he had just arrived. There was a slight look of surprise on his face. Xiao Qin. Jing Yu looked at Xiao Qin and Xiao Qin looked at Jing Yu. I miss you so much. Xiao Qin, why didn't you come back to look for me? Jing Yu's eyes seemed to penetrate the countless people and looked at Xiao Qin. It was as if at this moment, there was no one in Jing Yu's eyes. There were no more people and no more voices. There was only Xiao Qin. Xiao Qin, if there is an afterlife, I hope that we will never meet again. Jing Yu looked at Xiao Qin with the corners of her mouth curled up. The sadness and determination in her eyes made one's heart stop. The words that came out of her mouth were like a curse that drilled into Xiao Qin's ears. Jing Yu's words were said so far away and in such a noisy environment, Xiao Qin should not have heard them. However, for some reason, Xiao Qin heard them so clearly the moment he saw Jing Yu's lips. How desperate must it be for Jing Yu to say such words? At this moment, Xiao Qin's heart skipped a beat uncontrollably. In his daze, he seemed to have heard a clear voice calling out to him. Xiao Qin. That pleasant voice sounded so familiar that it seemed to have come from the distant horizon. Under everyone's gazes, the guard stepped forward and lifted the snow-white veil, blocking everyone's line of sight. Just like that, Jing Yu was covered within it. Because burning a saintess was a great taboo in offering sacrifices to the heavens. They had to isolate the person who was going to be sacrificed, so they covered her with a layer of veil. Jing Yu and Xiao Qin looked at each other because of the veil. Light the fire. Jing Yu slowly closed her eyes. Through the veil, Jing Yu could only vaguely see the figure outside or Xiao Qin's figure, who was standing still in the same spot. Everyone could see the huge fire burning. The bright yellow flames were like fireworks that soared into the sky. After burning for so long, they finally heard the cries from the flames. The cries that sounded like sobs echoed on the huge altar. The snow-white veil was burned and turned into ashes that drifted in the air. Xiao Qin's heart suddenly ached. He bent down and clutched his chest. He reached out to support himself against a stone pillar. His face was pale as he slowly raised his pitch-black eyes to look at the burning altar. He seemed to vaguely see Jing Yu's smiling voice. Xiao Qin. The cries were so familiar. In his mind, a person's figure seemed to emerge. Xiao Qin wanted to see clearly who the person in his mind was, but the person disappeared the moment he turned to look. Chapter 1383. Why did it feel so familiar? Xiao Qin tightly clutched his chest. This familiar feeling made Xiao Qin panic for no reason. Xiao Qin, why are you here? Nailin Yu saw Xiao Qin's pale face and was slightly shocked. She immediately walked over to support Xiao Qin and said, Xiao Qin, are you okay? What happened to you? Get out of my way. Xiao Qin's eyes were filled with malice. He lifted his hand and mercilessly pushed Nailin Yu away. He turned his head and looked at Nailin Yu with a cold and merciless gaze. He slowly opened his mouth and said, Why did she die? Xiao Qin. Nailin Yu staggered from being pushed by Xiao Qin. She looked at Xiao Qin with some fear and said, How would I know? Didn't the elders of the Holy Family say that it was because Jing Yu was already married in the secular world? As soon as Nailin Yu finished speaking, her face suddenly stiffened. She looked at Xiao Qin with a bit of fear. She looked at Xiao Qin's eyes, afraid that Xiao Qin had thought of something. The look in his eyes suddenly changed. I remember that you told me before. Xiao Chen walked closer to Nailan Yu and said with an incomparably cold voice, "You said that the holy maiden was the wife of the high priest and she had never left the holy family. But why was she married in the secular world?" After Nailan Yu heard Xiao Chen's question, she silently swallowed her saliva and said, "I said this for your own good. You also saw that this kind of woman, this kind of unchaste and unclean woman, also fooling around everywhere. I can't bear to see you get involved with her." Nailan Yu. Xiao Chen's eyes were filled with anger as he stared at Nailan Yu and shouted, "Who gave you the courage?" "Xiao Chen, don't push your luck." Nailan Moon was scolded by Xiao Chen, and her eyes suddenly showed anger. She swallowed her saliva and said, "Don't forget who brought you to the holy family." When Xiao Chen heard Nailan Yu's words, his expression didn't change in the slightest. He took a deep breath and slowly stood up. His eyes were filled with disgust as he looked at Nailan Yu. Then he turned around and walked away. Because of Xiao Chen's gaze, Nailan Yu suddenly felt a stifling feeling in her chest. She never thought that Xiao Chen would actually get angry at her because of Jing Yu. He clearly didn't know how to do it before. As Nailan Yu thought of this, she turned her gaze to the altar. The altar was now burned beyond recognition, and the woman who was tied to the altar with iron wires was now a charred corpse. "Sister Yu?" Zuern witnessed the whole process with his own eyes. He watched as the flames gradually extinguished, revealing the woman who was originally tied to the altar. She was originally full of vigor, but now, "Sister Yu?" Zuern called out. His eyes were red as he walked towards the altar. But when he took a step, he was suddenly pulled back by the servant behind him. "Little lord, you can't go over there. That is something dirty." The servant quickly said, "Get lost. Sister Yu is not dirty. Not dirty." After hearing the servant's words, Zuern seemed to have been provoked. He madly rushed towards the altar, but before he could get close to the altar, he was stopped by the guards. Chapter 1384. Knock him out. Jie said expressionlessly with a frown. Then, Zuern was knocked out and taken away by the guard. Yan Chen and the other elders heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the charred corpse being carried away. They had succeeded in the end. The poisonous thorn in their hearts had finally been completely removed today. From now on, no one in this world would be able to do anything to the sacred race. Nailan Yu watched Jing Yu's corpse being carried away with her own eyes. Her eyes were filled with indescribable joy. Jing Yu was finally dead. Xiao Chen was finally hers. Although he was not hers now, without Jing Yu, Nailan Yu had 1,000 ways to make Xiao Chen yield. She wanted to make Xiao Chen completely hers. Nailan Yu slowly raised the corners of her mouth and turned to leave. Such a grand sacrifice to the heavens was cruel, but in the hearts of most people, they were relieved. This was because they had eliminated a person who was a threat to the saint race. How great of a merit was this? That was what everyone thought. Qin Bai almost exhausted all his strength to rush back to the Holy Family. However, when he returned to the Holy Family, he was greeted with shocking news. Jing Yu was dead. Such news bombarded Qin Bai's ears. His eyes were filled with shock. "What did you say? What happened to Jing Yu?" When Qin Bai returned, he saw Jing Yu's body buried. The words on the new grave made Jing Yu's face turn pale. Her dark eyes stared at the grave in front of her. Jing Yu? All the disbelief and anger in Qin Bai's heart disappeared when he saw the mound in front of him. His face turned pale, and his body started to tremble. "High Priest, Jing Yu is dead." When Yun Weijun heard the news of Qin Bai's return, she had expected Qin Bai to come here as soon as possible. Yun Weijun's eyes flashed with a cold light. "Who is it?" Qin Bai slowly turned his head. He looked at Yun Weijun with eyes full of rage. His dark eyes stared at Yun Weijun as he asked, "Who gave you the power to attack Jing Yu?" Yun Weijun's eyes were filled with rage. "Qin Bai?" Yun Weijun looked at Qin Bai and her expression changed quickly. She swallowed silently and said, "I am the Holy Master. The Holy Maiden has committed a great crime. I can no longer tolerate her living in this world. Before she became the Holy Maiden, she wanted to kill you." Qin Bai, I did this for your own good, for the Holy Family. Yun Weijun stared at Qin Bai. Get out! Qin Bai pushed Yun Weijun away in disgust. His eyes were filled with bloodlust. He stared at Yun Weijun and said, Do you know how disgusting you make me feel? Qin Bai's cold words made Yun Weijun's expression change quickly. Then she saw Qin Bai turn around. Come, rebuild the entire graveyard according to the Saint Lord's resting place. After Qin Bai said that, Yun Weijun's face opened wide. She looked at Qin Bai with shock. She did not know what to make of him. Qin Bai treated Jingyu with such great respect after her death. But fortunately, Jingyu was dead. If Jingyu hadn't died, Yun Weijun would have thought that Qin Bai would have insisted on marrying Jingyu regardless of everyone's opposition. Then she would have been mercilessly pulled down from the position of Holy Master. Then, whether it was the Holy Family or Qin Bai, they would no longer be hers. Chapter 1385. Fortunately, Jingyu was already dead. The most important thing in the Holy Family was that Qin Bai built a graveyard wantonly because of Jingyu's death. Almost the entire Elder Cabinet was alarmed, but the Elder Cabinet knew that they had hidden this from Qin Bai. So they didn't say anything and just let Qin Bai do it. After all, she was already dead. Xiao Chen and Qin Bai finally came to an agreement. Before Xiao Chen left, Qin Bai suddenly said to Xiao Chen in a very strange tone, I didn't expect that you would be able to watch her die with your own eyes without doing anything. This sentence kept echoing in Xiao Chen's mind, but he still couldn't understand why Qin Bai would say such a thing. On the carriage back to the Tokyo, Xiao Chen looked out of the window and fell into deep thought. His dark eyes flashed with a cold light. Suddenly, Xiao Chen thought of the scene when Jingyu died. If there is an afterlife, I hope we will never meet again. Xiao Chen couldn't get over that sentence for a long time. Why did Jingyu say such words when she was about to die? That desperate look on her face made Xiao Chen's heart tremble slightly. Let me rest for a while. Xiao Chen lowered his eyes slightly and lay down on the soft couch in the carriage. When the people outside heard Xiao Chen's words, they quickly slowed down the carriage and moved forward very slowly. As the carriage swayed, Xiao Chen seemed to have a very, very long dream. In that dream, there was a person who kept calling Xiao Chen's name over and over again. She would smile, and her smile was very beautiful. Or she would scold Xiao Chen. They seemed to love each other very much. That person could affect all of his emotions. That person. Xiao Chen suddenly opened his eyes. His mind was blank. What did he dream of? Why was it so familiar? But after he woke up, his memory was so blurry. Xiao Chen raised his hand and rubbed his aching forehead. He sighed slightly and turned his body to the side and closed his eyes again. Ever since he saw the scene of Jingyu's death, Xiao Chen had been dreaming of strange things for the past few days. These things seemed to be related to Jingyu. Wasn't the person who kept calling Xiao Chen's name Jingyu? Xiao Chen took a deep breath. He turned his head and casually sat on the side. He lowered his eyes slowly and didn't say a word. Jingyu didn't know what was happening because she was knocked unconscious when the fire was ignited. That's right, she was knocked unconscious. My head hurts. Jingyu slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she felt when she opened her eyes was a sharp pain at the back of her head. She reached out and touched the back of her head with a pained expression. It was fucking swollen. Jingyu silently propped herself up and sat up. Then she looked at where she was now. She was in a shabby thatched hut. The hut was wet and she was lying on the dry straw that was obviously freshly made. What the hell is this place? Jingyu muttered silently. Just as she was about to stand up, the wooden door was suddenly pushed open. A dark figure appeared in front of Jingyu. It's you. When Jingyu saw the person who had appeared, a murderous look appeared in her eyes. She looked at the man who had walked in with vigilance. Her eyes were filled with coldness. Chapter 1386. The man who was holding the firewood was dressed in black. He was also looking at Jingyu with a pair of cold eyes. There was a hideous scar on his face that went from the bridge of his nose down to his neck. It spread from her face to her neck, and then it was hidden under her clothes. How could Jing Yu not recognize the person in front of her? The scar on his face was left behind by a silver arrow. This person was Nailin Yu's capable shadow guard, Shadow. When the shadow guard saw that Jing Yu had woken up, he pursed his lips and looked at Jing Yu. Then he lowered his head and took out a jade pendant. Jing Yu looked at the jade pendant in Shadow's hand and her eyes widened. Xiao Chen's jade pendant? Wasn't it in Lu Miaoqiu's hands? Why is it with you? Jing Yu was slightly surprised. Last time, she was still looking for the jade pendant. Jing Yu had given it to Lu Miaoqiu as a wedding gift. Now, this jade pendant had appeared in Shadow's hands. The crown princess gave it to me. Shadow heard Jing Yu's question and slowly said, the crown princess said that if I took out this jade pendant, I would be able to gain the 9th imperial concubine's trust. Jing Yu looked at Shadow with a strange expression. She slowly reached out and took the jade pendant from Shadow's hand. Then she looked up at Shadow and said, aren't you Nailin Yu's shadow guard? Why are you here? Shadow heard Jing Yu's words and slightly froze. Then he said, I have already been abandoned by my original owner. I am now an ownerless object. Nailin Yu doesn't want you anymore? Jing Yu's eyes were filled with astonishment. This person had done so many things for Nailin Yu. No matter what it was, he was willing to do anything. Those dirty things that couldn't be seen by others, he was willing to do them. And now, Nailin Yu didn't want him anymore? If Nailin Yu didn't want you, she would have killed you. After all, you know too many things. Why didn't she kill you? Why did she allow you to interact with Miaoqiu? Jing Yu's eyes were filled with confusion. After Nailin Yu abandoned me, she sent people to kill me. I tried my best to escape, but in the end, I was saved by the crown princess. I know that I am a dirty object and not worthy of serving another owner. So, I only promised the crown princess one thing to repay her for saving my life. That was to save you, the 9th imperial concubine. So it's like that. After hearing the Shadow's explanation, Jing Yu nodded her head in understanding. She slowly relaxed the vigilance in her heart. She watched as the Shadow lit up the bonfire and handed over the water. Then she slowly lowered her head. How did you save me? Jing Yu's eyes were filled with confusion. She blinked and asked. After following the original master into the sacred clan, I had been hiding in the dark until the moment you, the 9th imperial concubine, were burned. Then I tied up a strange woman to replace you. The Shadow said it simply, as if there was no explanation. However, Jing Yu felt her heart tremble. She knew that this person in front of her was terrifying. His martial arts were worthy of being a shadow guard. Since you have been hiding in the shadows, do you know what happened to Xiao Chen? Jing Yu seemed to have suddenly thought of something. Her eyes were filled with surprise as she looked at the Shadow and asked. The Shadow looked at Jing Yu strangely when she heard this. Chapter 1387. I don't know. The Shadow slowly spat out these two words. Jing Yu's heart, which had been filled with joy, once again relaxed. Jing Yu's emotions once again dropped. She took a deep breath, looked around, and asked, Then where are we now? Where are we going? I'll send you to the Crown Princess side. My mission is complete. The Shadow slightly lowered his head and said, Right now, we're outside the forest outside the Holy Family. 9th Imperial Concubine, rest for a bit. We'll set off in a bit. I'll wait for you outside. There's no need for that. Let's go, Jing Yu said as she stood up and stared at the Shadow. The Shadow nodded and reached out to take a large robe from the shelf. He said, There are too many people around. Put it on. Jing Yu looked at the large robe that Yi handed over. She lowered her eyes and put it on. Her eyes were expressionless. The hut was empty. Jing Yu and the Shadow quickly walked forward. It wasn't until the Shadow brought Jing Yu to a dock and snuck onto a merchant ship that Jing Yu realized that the Holy Family was on a small island. The island was very wide. The palace of the Holy Family was on a hill in the middle of the island. The members of the Holy Family were scattered all over the island. Shadow? Are you still called Shadow? Jing Yu was wearing a large black robe and a black veil hat. She slightly tilted her head to look at the shadow and asked in confusion. You can call me anything you want. The shadow didn't seem to have much of an expression or emotion. He just stood quietly beside Jingyu in a protective manner. This scene made Jingyu's eyes contract slightly. She really didn't understand if Nailin Yu was really retarded. She actually didn't treat such a good shadow guard well. Shadow, do you hate Nailin Yu? Jingyu slowly turned her head and asked the shadow. I don't hate him. The shadow slowly shook his head. But she treated you like that and wanted to kill you. Don't you hate her? Jingyu looked at Ing-yi with interest. Master is master. No matter what you do, you are master. The shadow said quietly, dying for my master is what I should do. Whatever my master does to me is what I should do. The shadow's words were so stiff, but it made Jingyu laugh. You hate her. Jingyu firmly spat out these words. Her lips curled into a faint smile as she said, if you didn't hate her, then you wouldn't be alive right now. You would be willing to die at Nailin Yu's hands. I will. The shadow slowly lowered his head and said, the original master has already abandoned me. From now on I am free. Jingyu looked at the side of the shadow's face and revealed a faint smile. She didn't say anything. She turned her head and looked at the island getting further and further away. She looked at the Holy Family getting further and further away from her. She slowly narrowed her eyes. Right now, in everyone's eyes, she must be dead, right? Jingyu slightly curled the corners of her lips. She looked up at the blue sky and suddenly felt as if her heart had opened up. In her life, there wasn't just Xiao Chen. There were many, many people in her life. Holy Family, when I, Jingyu, come back, it will be the day your Holy Family will be destroyed. Jingyu looked at everyone and slowly curled the corners of her lips. The smile in her eyes was very obvious, but the words she said were very ordinary. Chapter 1388. It sounded like a joke, but it also sounded like a casual remark. However, Jingyu was actually making a vow in her heart. This was the second time that Jingyu had seen the sea. She lowered her head slightly and leaned against the railing. Looking at the sparkling sea, the smile in Jingyu's eyes suddenly froze. The expression on her face changed. She suddenly felt that every corner of this world was filled with countless memories of Xiao Chen. Shadow, do you like the sea? Jingyu's expression was slightly absent-minded for a moment before she suddenly asked. I don't know. Shadow was silent for a moment before it slowly spat out these three words. When Jingyu heard Shadow's answer, she suddenly turned her head and saw Shadow frowning. It seemed that Shadow was really thinking about Jingyu's question. Looking at Shadow's appearance, Jingyu suddenly felt that it was funny. Do you want to know if you like it or not? Jingyu suddenly straightened her back and slightly arched her eyebrows as she winked at Shadow. What? Shadow was stunned when it heard Jingyu's words. Before Shadow could react, Shadow's wrist was suddenly grabbed by Jingyu. Shadow was slightly shocked and its body suddenly fell towards the boat. Let's go down. Jingyu smiled and shouted. Then, she pulled the Shadow and jumped into the sea. Splash! When Jingyu and Shadow fell into the water, the people on the boat seemed to have heard the commotion and turned their heads. However, they didn't see anything. They thought that someone had fallen into the sea and hurriedly leaned against the railing to look down. However, what they saw was a sea without any abnormalities. The sea was calm without any waves. If someone had fallen into the sea, there should have been a cry for help. Since there was no cry or abnormality, they should have seen wrongly. That person shook his head helplessly and turned his head back. At this moment, Jingyu, who was dressed in black, was swimming nimbly at the bottom of the sea. After such a long time, she came into contact with the sea again. This feeling was so comfortable. Jingyu slightly raised the corner of her mouth and looked at Shadow. Shadow held its breath and looked at Jingyu's swimming movements. Just as it was about to say something, it suddenly saw something on the surface of the sea. Shadow was slightly shocked. When it was about to draw its sword, Xiao Chen shook his head and stopped it. In the deep sea, Jingyu's eyes flashed with a scorching light. Then, something strange happened. Shadow saw countless fish swimming in from all directions and then circling around them. They even showed their white bellies in front of Shadow. Shadow's eyes widened slightly as it saw a huge figure appear behind Jingyu. Its heart trembled slightly. However, it saw that this big guy was happily wagging its tail under Jingyu's palm. It startled all the small fish and scattered them. Jingyu waved her hand towards Ingzi and pulled Ingzi onto the back of the huge fish. They started to swim at the bottom of the sea. After coming out of the water for a split second, Jingyu and Ingzi took a deep breath and dived into the water once again. Ha ha! Jingyu and the Shadow were getting further and further away from the ship. They were moving around in all directions, occasionally diving into the water. The Shadow was surprised at first, but now her eyes were full of light. Chapter 1389. She tilted her head and looked at Jingyu. When she saw the bright smile in Jingyu's eyes, her expression softened and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. How is it? Can you tell me now? Do you like the sea? Jingyu asked the Shadow with a smile as she rode the dolphin. Yes. The Shadow nodded slightly and said, I like it. Pa, I knew you would like it. Jingyu laughed loudly. Her laughter was very pleasant to the ears. The Shadow and Jingyu played on the surface of the sea and scrupulously and swam freely on the seabed. Then, in the middle of the night, they accurately found the boat that they had jumped off. Taking advantage of the night, they climbed up the rope on the boat silently. Lower your voice. Jingyu turned slightly and made a shushing gesture to the Shadow. Her sneaky behavior made the Shadow, for some reason, want to laugh when she saw Jingyu's behavior. Jingyu held a nervous heart and jumped onto the deck of the boat. After looking around to make sure that no one was around, she waved at the Shadow. The Shadow also jumped onto the deck of the boat. Jingyu's action warmed the Shadow's heart. Seeing Jingyu take the initiative to take the lead, which looked like she was protecting her, the Shadow's expression changed slightly. She bowed slightly to Jingyu and the two returned to their respective rooms. Jingyu's body smelled like salt. Of course, she had to take a bath before she could rest. Jingyu had just finished her bath when she suddenly felt the boat shake. Her expression changed slightly. She raised her hand and put on her clothes. What's wrong? Jingyu frowned slightly and walked out of the room. When she saw the Shadow come out, she frowned slightly and asked. I don't know. The Shadow shook his head slightly and said, You rest first. I'll go take a look. Jingyu nodded slightly. She watched the Shadow turn around and leave. She shook her head slightly and returned to her room. She hadn't sat down for long when she heard a cry of surprise from outside. The expression on Jingyu's face changed rapidly. Then, she abruptly opened the door. The Shadow was about to knock on the door with his hand raised. What's happening outside? Could it be the Jade Belt Pirates? Jingyu's expression turned ugly as she looked at the Shadow with a conflicted expression. The Shadow nodded silently when he heard Jingyu's words. Are they really pirates? Jingyu's mouth twitched fiercely. She said angrily, Yuan Mingyuan didn't come back to be a pirate again, did he? Let's go and take a look. The Shadow stood in place with a conflicted expression. Looking at Jingyu's excited expression, the corners of his mouth twitched. He silently followed behind Jingyu and walked outside. This merchant ship was now in a mess because of encountering pirates. There were shouts everywhere. Jingyu then saw two ships approaching Jingyu's ship. The shouts from their mouths made Jingyu frown. These pirates were really something. If they didn't shout, they wouldn't think they were pirates. What were they shouting for? Jingyu stood in place for a long time, but she didn't see any familiar faces. She frowned slightly and suddenly felt that she was overthinking. This part of the sea was different from the part of the sea where Xiaochen and Jingyu went before. Chapter 1390. How did she meet Yuan Mingyuan? Moreover, Yuan Mingyuan should be with Heli and Theo and the others. What's the situation now? Jingyu sighed deeply and immediately lost interest. She watched as the pirates shot arrows at the ship and ordered the ship to stop. Jingyu pursed her lips slightly. Seeing the ship stop, no one dared to move. Then, She watched as the legendary pirate jumped onto the ship and ordered the people to take out the valuable items. Fortunately, these pirates were robbers. Looking at the piled-up treasures, Jing Yu's mouth twitched fiercely. If she knew there were so many treasures on this ship, she would have stolen them first. Now it was snatched away by others. Jing Yu sighed deeply, turned her head and walked in the other direction. Just as she was about to go somewhere else, she was suddenly stopped by a voice. "Hey, you two, hurry up and take out all the valuable items." Jing Yu paused slightly and looked at the approaching person. Her mouth twitched fiercely. Seeing the person take out a sack and hand it to Jing Yu frowned slightly. She blinked and looked at the person in front of her and asked, "Are you talking to me?" "Nonsense, if I'm not talking to you, who am I talking to?" The man had a ferocious appearance. When he saw Jing Yu wearing a veil, he frowned slightly. Why was she wearing a veil in the middle of the night? "Oh." Jing Yu nodded her head in understanding. She smiled brightly at the person in front of her and said, "But I don't have money. What should I do? Why don't you give me some?" "What the fuck did you say?" When the person heard Jing Yu's words, he was slightly stunned. Then he pulled out a big knife from his waist and raised his hand to place it on Jing Yu's neck. The shadow behind her frowned slightly when he saw this scene. "I say, you pirates are really something." Jing Yu turned her head slightly and looked at the large blade on her neck. She frowned in displeasure and said, "If you have something to say it properly. Why do you have to use a blade when everything is fine, you?" Just as the person was about to speak, his body trembled violently. His face was full of shock. Then he silently lowered his head and saw an arrow piercing his heart from behind. Jing Yu was about to break the man's hand, but before she could do so, she saw an arrow piercing through the man's heart. Then, the man's body slowly fell to the ground. Jing Yu was slightly stunned. When she looked up, she saw a big ship approaching Jing Yu's ship. Arrows were released towards the pirates on Jing Yu's ship. "Fuck. It's the Dragon Crown Prince's men again." Jing Yu heard someone call out to her amidst the panicked shouts. "Dragon Prince? Prince?" Jing Yu's eyes were full of confusion. Just as Jing Yu was puzzled, she saw the ships approaching Jing Yu's ship. The pirates all fled in one direction. Their panicked appearance surprised Jing Yu. What kind of person had such great ability to make these pirates tremble in fear? Where did these monkeys come from? When Jing Yu slightly raised her head, she heard the shouts of the people around her. She saw agile monkeys on the ship, swinging the ropes on the ship and throwing themselves onto the ship. Chapter 1391. Is everyone all right? Jing Yu looked at the monkeys, and for some reason, her heart suddenly trembled. Her eyes revealed a slight look of astonishment. The captain's questions sounded in her ears, but Jing Yu didn't pay attention to it. Her eyes were fixed on the approaching ship. "Dragon Prince, thank you Dragon Prince for saving our lives." When the ship got closer, Jing Yu could clearly see the man in black standing at the bow of the ship with a longbow on his back. He should be called a boy. The boy was dressed in black and carried a longbow on his back. He stood at the bow of the ship, and his expression did not change at all. He looked at these people and nodded slightly before turning to leave. There was a group of adults following behind the boy. The moment Jing Yu saw the boy, her eyes widened and she froze on the spot. "Xiao Bai." Jing Yu slowly called out these words. The man who had just turned around to leave suddenly froze. Then he turned around with a face full of shock. His pitch-black eyes immediately saw Jing Yu, who was dressed in black and had a veil over her face, standing among the people on the ship. "It's..." The moment Xiao Bai saw Jing Yu, his eyes widened and he revealed a look of surprise. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the Dragon Prince, who was always expressionless, actually rushed towards the ship in front of him. "Mother!" Under everyone's shocked gazes, Xiao Bai actually spat out these words that made everyone's legs go soft and they almost knelt down. "Xiao Bai, it's really you." Jing Yu's eyes were filled with surprise. She reached out and caught Xiao Bai, who was rushing over. She hugged Xiao Bai tightly in her arms. Her eyes were filled with surprise. Xiaobai hugged Jingyu tightly and started crying. I miss your mother so much. Xiaobai buried his head in Jingyu's embrace and sobbed softly. You've already grown so big. Jingyu patted Xiaobai's back and said emotionally, Mother misses you too. This scene completely shocked everyone. Shadow's eyes widened and his mouth twitched. Looking at Qinbai's appearance, he was at least in his teens. Jingyu, who wasn't even 20 years old, actually had a teenage son? Wait a minute, let me calm down. Why do I feel like the world has been turned upside down? The corners of the Shadow's mouth twitched. The people on the ship were all stunned. They didn't know what was going on. On the other side, the people on Xiaobai's ship were stunned for a moment. Then, a look of surprise appeared in their eyes. It's the Dragon Prince's mother. Those people looked as if they already knew. Xiaobai, how have you been? Jingyu and Xiaobai hugged for a long time. Only then did Jingyu let go of her hand and carefully look at Xiaobai. Her face hidden behind the black veil was filled with worry as she asked. Mother, I've been very good. Xiaobai looked at Jingyu proudly and said, Look, I can protect myself. I can also protect others. His proud expression made Jingyu smile. She reached out and patted Xiaobai's head. Only then did she realize that Xiaobai had grown so tall. A slight warmth appeared in her eyes. She had said that she would come to pick him up, but she didn't expect the delay to be so long. Chapter 1392. Mother, what are you doing here? Xiaobai was no longer the wild child he used to be. He had seen a lot of things, and when he saw Jingyu's outfit he immediately understood what was going on. Mother, let's go. Let's talk on the boat. Xiaobai turned around and looked at Jingyu. Okay. Jingyu nodded and smiled at Xiaobai. She followed Xiaobai onto his boat. When Jingyu, Xiaobai, and the Shadow sat in the room, Jingyu raised her hand and took off the veil on her face, revealing her beautiful face and a pair of golden-green eyes. How could Xiaobai not be familiar with Jingyu's eyes? Xiaobai, is this your boat? Jingyu looked at Xiaobai and asked. Yes. It's mine. Xiaobai looked at Jingyu with eyes full of affection. Without saying a word, he threw himself into Jingyu's arms. The way he rubbed against Jingyu was exactly the same as before. Jingyu's eyes shone with warmth as she raised her hand and patted Xiaobai's head. You're already so old, yet you still act like this. What a joke. Jingyu's eyes were full of affection. If anyone dares to say anything bad, I'll teach them a lesson. Xiaobai's eyes were full of ruthlessness. When Jingyu heard Xiaobai's words, she smiled helplessly and said, Then the people outside are all your people? When Xiaobai heard Jingyu's question, he slowly sat up and looked at Jingyu and said, They are all my brothers, my subordinates. They were originally pirates on the sea, but I subdued them to maintain the peace of the sea. Just like today. Xiaobai looked at Jingyu with a smile and said, Mother, I did what I said. Now I can protect myself, and I can also protect others. Yes, very good. Jingyu's eyes were tinged with a faint smile. She raised her hand and patted Xiaobai's head. Her eyes were full of warmth. The two sat on the ship and talked for a long time. Only then did Jingyu know what Xiaobai was doing on the sea. Originally, he followed Big Brother Fong to do the escort business. But later he was tossed around by the pirates, and many things happened. In a fit of anger, Xiaobai started to fight with these pirates. He didn't expect that this fight wouldn't stop. Xiaobai had become the overlord of the seas and had conquered the entire 5 prefectures bay. Now he was sailing everywhere. These subordinates were all subdued by Xiaobai and were willing to stay by his side. They didn't mind that Xiaobai was just a child. Big Brother Fong was still guarding the 5 prefectures bay, while Xiaobai was wandering outside. This was the last place Xiaobai was prepared to go to. After arriving here, he was ready to return. He didn't expect to be so lucky to meet Jingyu here. When Jingyu heard Xiaobai's words, she let out a deep sigh. When Xiaobai asked her why she was here, Jingyu didn't explain in detail. She only gave a vague answer, as if she didn't want Xiaobai to know too much. Mother! On the deck, Jingyu raised her head slightly and looked at the monkeys that had fallen everywhere. She didn't expect that Xiaobai would bring these monkeys with him. Jing Yu turned around and saw Xiaobai walking over. His small body was straight. The child who had been curled up in Jing Yu's arms had grown so big now. His eyes were so handsome. Chapter 1393. Mother, what are you looking at? Xiaobai stood beside Jing Yu. After a night, the sun was shining on the surface of the sea. Jing Yu stood on the deck with her veil on and squinted her eyes. I'm looking at the sea. Jing Yu smiled at Xiaobai and said, I didn't expect Xiaobai to have grown so big. It's already been so long. Xiaobai muttered. Then, as if he thought of something, he carefully looked at Jing Yu and asked, Mother, where's father? Why don't I see father with you? Jing Yu suddenly heard Xiaobai's words and her heart trembled. She clenched her fists and said, I'm going to look for him now. Oh. Xiaobai looked at Jing Yu's reaction and clenched his fists. He didn't ask any more questions. Jing Yu saw that Xiaobai didn't ask any more questions and secretly let out a sigh of relief. She turned her head away. Crown Prince. Someone is coming. Just as Jing Yu and Xiaobai were standing on the deck, the sound of hurried footsteps suddenly came from behind them. Jing Yu saw Xiaobai's expression instantly change when he saw Xiaobai, who was originally standing obediently beside her, waiting for them. Who is it? Xiaobai's black clothes made Jing Yu's heart tighten. If this subordinate didn't see wrongly, it's the group of people who ran away last night. The man looked at Xiaobai and frowned. Oof, I let them go last night. I didn't expect them to come knocking on my door today. Xiaobai's expression was incomparably cold. His dark eyes were filled with ferocity. He turned to look at the man and said, Tell the brothers to prepare for battle. The man bowed and quickly walked to the side. Mother, I'll be back soon. As Xiaobai walked away, he turned his head slightly to the side and gave Jing Yu a resplendent smile. Then he left just like that. Jing Yu stood in place and raised her eyebrows slightly. Looking at Xiaobai's back, a faint smile appeared on her face. She didn't know why, but when she saw Xiaobai like this, Jing Yu suddenly felt like she was looking at Xiao Chen. It was like she was looking at a miniature version of Xiao Chen. He was cold and indifferent to everyone, but when he turned to look at her, he smiled. Jing Yu's eyes slightly lowered. Unfortunately, the current Xiao Chen, whether it was to her or others, he was cold and indifferent to her. Is he really your son? After holding back the words for an entire night, Shadow finally saw Xiaobai leave. He silently swallowed his saliva and looked at Jing Yu with a conflicted expression. Jing Yu smiled and nodded confidently. She said, He is my son, the son of Xiao Chen and I. When Jing Yu said this sentence naturally, a faint smile appeared in her eyes. However, the bitterness in her heart instantly filled Jing Yu's heart. Her and Xiao Chen's son. Jing Yu's eyes were slightly sour. She suddenly thought of the scene in Jinling City. It was clearly something that happened not long ago, but now it made Jing Yu's heart ache. Was it something that happened in her memory? Chapter 1394. Their child. They originally had a child, but how could it be gone? Jing Yu's heart trembled fiercely. Nailin Yu, are you okay? The shadow saw that Jing Yu's face was slightly pale and suddenly frowned, looking at Jing Yu as he asked. I'm fine. Jing Yu took a deep breath and stood firm. She raised her hand and waved away the shadow's hand that reached out to support her. She didn't look at the shadow and turned to leave with a cold face. When the shadow saw Jing Yu's action, his hand froze in place. It was as if he felt Jing Yu's disgust. The shadow could almost guess that Jing Yu must have thought of Nailin Yu, which was why she had such a reaction. Jing Yu sat peacefully in the bedroom with her eyes slightly closed, not moving at all until she felt the ship shake. At first, it was only a slight shake, but after a while, the shaking became more and more intense, and even the sound of collision could be heard. Jing Yu's sitting body slowly stood up, and she raised her hand to take the gauze hat and put it on. When she came to the wide deck outside, she also heard the sounds of shouting. The scene in front of her was a little chaotic. Xiaobai's ship was surrounded by 4 or 5 small ships, and now Xiaobai was fighting with these people. The arrows that were shot out and the figures that rushed up were all killed one by one. After so long, this was the first time that Jingyu saw Xiaobai in battle. He was dressed in black and stood at the bow of the ship. He held an arrow in his hand and shot it as if he didn't know what fatigue was. That pair of pitch-black eyes flashed with a moving light. The gaze of the manor lord caused Jingyu to be slightly shocked. In Xiaobai's eyes, there was a murderous aura. The arrows that were shot out were mixed with an incomparably strong and violent aura, and they easily pierced through the heart of another person. It was flawless. Jingyu's eyes flashed with a strong sense of surprise. Then she slowly narrowed her eyes and looked at the chaotic battle in front of her. We've reached an impasse. Unknowingly, the shadow appeared behind Jingyu. He looked at Xiaobai with surprise in his eyes. He squinted his eyes and looked at Jingyu, asking, "Aren't you going to help him?" "There's no need." Jingyu slowly curled her lips and said, "We'll just watch." The shadow looked at Jingyu's unworried expression and raised his eyebrows slightly. Then, he calmly stood beside Jingyu and looked at the situation in front of him. Just as Jingyu and the shadow were having fun watching the battle, they saw Xiaobai instantly give the order to change the situation of the battle. On this battlefield, Xiaobai changed from being passive to active. Those arrogant monkeys played their biggest role, and almost all the ships on the other side were thrown into chaos. Jingyu looked at Xiaobai's almost tyrannical methods, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. He's really like Xiaochen. Jingyu's face instantly froze when this thought appeared in her mind. This kind of momentary longing seemed to have become a habit that was hard to get rid of. Jingyu clearly did not want to think about it. However, she couldn't help but think about it again and again. Jingyu slowly lowered her head. Xiaobai's victory was a foregone conclusion, and there seemed to be nothing more to see. However, just as Jingyu turned to leave, the sound of musical instruments suddenly rang out on the battlefield. Chapter 1395. This sound, Jingyu's face suddenly turned pale. Her eyes were filled with fear as she looked in the direction of the music. On the opposite ship, the sound of musical instruments was coming from somewhere. How could Jingyu not be familiar with this music? The tone was so pleasant to the ears, but the moment Jingyu heard this music, she suddenly felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. Sound attack. Jingyu's lips were trembling as she spat out these two words. The expression on the shadow's face also changed. This situation, which was originally going to be a one-sided situation, suddenly fell into a short silence because of the sudden sound of music. Then, under everyone's strange gazes, something seemed to appear on the calm surface of the sea, swimming over and over again in the deep sea. It's a vicious shark. Just as everyone was frightened by this, a sharp-eyed person suddenly saw a sharp triangular thing on the surface of the sea and immediately cried out in panic. After this person's voice fell, everyone's eyes were filled with shock. What's going on? What happened? Why is the vicious shark here? That vicious shark is swimming towards us. What's going on? Who's controlling this vicious shark? The eyes of the people on Xiaobai's ship were filled with astonishment. The panicked voice rang out, waking everyone on the bed. At this moment, arrogant laughter rang out from the opposite ship. "Ha, what dragon prince? In my eyes, he's just a fart." On the opposite ship, the middle-aged man standing on the bow of the ship was filled with arrogance and resentment. "Now let's see how your dragon prince will deal with this." That person's pair of pitch-black eyes stared at Xiaobai and said, "Aren't you just a brat who's still wet behind the ears? How dare you call yourself the dragon prince of the sea?" "Fuck you." The man laughed arrogantly and said, "Today, I'll show you what it means to be the overlord of the sea." Under the man's shout, the vicious sharks rammed into Xiaobai's ship. The music was still ringing out. The vicious sharks avoided the smaller ships and rammed into Xiaobai's ship. "Ha!" The middle-aged man patiently looked at Xiaobai's ashen face and suddenly laughed arrogantly. If it wasn't for the help of an expert, he wouldn't have dared to bring such a small group of people to challenge Xiaobai today. Originally, he just wanted to take a gamble, but he didn't expect that he really had such ability. It was really amazing. Xiaobai ordered his men to stabilize the situation as he commanded his men to continue attacking. Jing Yu stood behind Xiao Bai, and all she could hear was the magical music. Jing Yu closed her eyes tightly. When she opened them again, her golden-green eyes were shining with an amazing light. The music was still there, but it had no effect on Jing Yu. The music that was transmitted to her ears had no effect other than familiarity. Jing Yu slowly lowered her eyes after the initial real gold. The music wasn't targeted at her. And in Jing Yu's ears, the control of the music was so weak that Jing Yu felt that it could be ignored. She thought of the music that had entered her ears during the battle outside Jinling City. Chapter 1396. The power of control was like an invisible hand clutching Jing Yu's heart. Jing Yu didn't even dare to resist. However, today's music was so different. It seemed like she hadn't cultivated it to perfection. Jing Yu narrowed her eyes slightly and adjusted her breathing and heartbeat in an instant. She slowly straightened her body and walked toward Xiao Bai step by step. Just as Jing Yu was about to take a step, Xiao Bai's group froze. Some people around Xiao Bai were stunned when they saw Jing Yu's actions. Some of them wanted to stop Jing Yu, as if they wanted to tell Jing Yu that there was danger ahead. However, at this moment, Xiao Bai turned his head as if he felt something. "Mother!" Xiao Bai saw Jing Yu walking over and froze for a moment. Then, he lowered his head and looked at Jing Yu as if he was very afraid. He said, "I'm sorry, Mother. I've disappointed you, silly child." Jing Yu heard Xiao Bai's words and patted his head. She said, "That person isn't someone you can deal with. That person is Mother's enemy." "Enemy?" Xiao Bai's expression turned cold when he heard Jing Yu's words. He frowned and looked at Jing Yu. He asked, "Mother, did they hurt you?" Jing Yu curled her lips and said, "Tell your people to leave." "Okay, everyone leave." Xiao Bai didn't hesitate and immediately ordered everyone to leave after Jing Yu's words. "Dragon Prince." Xiao Bai's subordinates were shocked when they heard Xiao Bai's words. Just as they were about to say something, they saw Xiao Bai's cold gaze and slowly lowered their heads. "Yes." Everyone took a step back and looked at Jing Yu with scrutinizing eyes. Jing Yu seemed to feel everyone's gazes. She lowered her eyes and didn't say a word. Then she turned and walked away. "Just a mere sound attack. How dare you show off when you haven't mastered it at all?" Jing Yu stood at the bow of the ship. Her golden-green eyes were covered by the black veil, and no one could see them. They were shining with a resplendent light. Jing Yu's clear voice sounded. Everyone's eyes were filled with confusion. Believe. What was Jing Yu telling him to back off? Everyone's eyes were filled with confusion. They looked at each other and didn't know what was going on. Just as everyone was confused, Xiao Bai and the shadow couldn't help but look at the sea. They saw with their own eyes that a vicious shark was rushing over and seemed to want to hit Xiao Bai's ship. However, just as Jing Yu's words sounded, the vicious shark strangely stopped. It was as if it was frozen in place. It wasn't just one vicious shark, but all of the vicious sharks. The ferocious sharks strangely stopped. Xiao Bai's eyes flickered. Everyone suddenly felt the strange situation. Why did the ferocious sharks stop? Look, one of them suddenly cried out in surprise and said in horror, "Look at that vicious shark. It's going back." Oh my God! Everyone saw that the vicious shark that was attacking them was swimming toward the ship. Suddenly, everyone's eyes were filled with shock. Chapter 1397. While she was washing her face, the music that was reverberating on the surface of the sea became louder and louder. There was a hint of anxiety in the music, and in the midst of this anxiety, there were even a few wrong notes. What's going on? What's going on? The middle-aged man on the opposite side, who had a smug look on his face just a second ago, suddenly had a drastic change in expression when he saw the vicious sharks swimming towards his ship. "Xiao Bai, give me the bow and arrow." Jing Yu looked at this scene without any expression in her eyes as she tilted her head slightly and said to Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai raised his hand and handed the bow and arrow in his hand to Jing Yu. He watched as Jing Yu slowly drew the longbow, and then heard the music suddenly stop. From the opposite ship, a person staggered out. What is this? The person's face was very young, and his eyes were filled with shock as he looked toward Xiaobai's ship. The moment he looked over, he saw Jingyu standing at the bow of the ship with a longbow in her hand. She was dressed in black, and her face was covered with a black veil, which clearly covered almost all of Jingyu's face. But the moment the man looked over, his eyes were filled with shock. It's an abnormal pupil? Almost at the same time the man opened his mouth to speak, Jingyu suddenly released an arrow from the longbow in her hand, accurately piercing the young man's heart. Hiss! The moment Jingyu released the arrow, everyone standing behind Qin instantly widened their eyes and sucked in a breath of cold air. What accurate archery! Those people can't live. Jingyu lowered her eyes slightly, looked sideways at Xiaobai and asked, "Can I kill them?" When Xiaobai heard Jingyu's question, he blinked slightly, and then the corners of his mouth curled up into a bright smile as he replied. "That's good." After Jingyu heard Xiaobai's answer, the corners of her mouth curled up into a happy smile. If the scene just now had frightened everyone, then the next scene would have made everyone fall into a state of panic. After Jingyu and Xiaobai's conversation ended, everyone suddenly saw something strange on the surface of the sea. Everyone looked up at the strange sea in the distance and narrowed their eyes slightly. "It looks like vicious sharks." After a person's exclamation, everyone saw the vicious sharks that were gathering from all directions rapidly approaching them. They looked at the triangle on the surface of the sea from afar. There were at least hundreds and thousands of these vicious sharks. Everyone's eyes widened at this moment. The fear in their eyes was so obvious. Those vicious sharks are coming towards us. Everyone looked at the vicious sharks that were rapidly approaching, and their faces were filled with fear. Their eyes widened, and they clenched the weapons in their hands tightly as they swallowed slightly. What should we do? Everyone swallowed slightly, and when they looked at the people next to them, they realized that the people next to them were also nervous. Looking at the vicious sharks approaching bit by bit, their legs and stomachs trembled uncontrollably from nervousness, and they swallowed fiercely. Just when everyone was ready to see the vicious sharks approaching with their own eyes, something completely unexpected happened. Chapter 1398. When those vicious sharks arrived in front of them, they actually bypassed their ship. That's right. They bypassed them. The sharks directly bypassed Xiaobai's ship in batches and fiercely rushed to the other side of the ship. The eyes of the people on the other ship were filled with fear as they looked at the approaching sharks and cried out. Under their cries, those vicious sharks didn't stop at all and directly overturned those ships. "Let's go!" Jingyu saw the ferocious look of those vicious sharks with her own eyes. Without any obstruction, she lowered her head, turned around, and calmly walked back to the house behind her. The people standing on the boat all turned their heads when they saw Jingyu's action. It seemed that, just after Jingyu told them to retreat, then, the situation changed drastically. Just because of Jingyu, how did Jingyu do it? Everyone trembled violently as they looked at Jingyu's back. They didn't know why, but at this moment, they looked at Jingyu with an unnatural gaze. It was as if they suddenly understood how Xiaobai could be so powerful. So it was because he had such a powerful mother? She could actually command the vicious sharks? The surface of the sea was in a mess. The few ships that had gathered around Xiaobai's ship were all destroyed under everyone's gaze. The people on the ships had all become food for the vicious sharks. There were hundreds and thousands of vicious sharks swimming around the ship. But not a single vicious shark touched their ship. Xiaobai's subordinates stared at the vicious sharks with vigilant eyes, but they didn't expect that these vicious sharks would really swim away calmly after eating and drinking to their heart's content. They didn't seem to be interested in their ship at all. Dragon Prince. Jingyu, Xiaobai, and the others had already returned to their rooms. When they heard the call, they blinked in confusion and turned to look at the person who had rushed in. This person was called Jiang Xiaojun, and he was one of Xiaobai's generals. At this moment, he rushed into the room with a look of surprise, attracting the attention of Jingyu, Xiaobai, and the others. "What is it?" Xiaobai raised his eyebrows slightly and asked Jiang Xiaojun. "Those vicious sharks have all left, and the people of Snakehead are all dead. Jiang Shaojun swallowed his saliva and said. As he spoke, he looked at Jingyu with eyes full of fear. Xiaobai nodded calmly. I understand. Xiaobai narrowed his eyes and said, Don't tell anyone about what you saw today. Do you understand? When Jiang Shaojun heard Xiaobai's warning, he was slightly startled. Then, he nervously nodded and lowered his head. Xiaobai waved his hand slightly, and Jiang Shaojun left the room. Xiaobai's tense expression only softened a little when he was facing his subordinates. He turned to look at Jingyu and asked worriedly, Mother, what happened to your eyes? It's fine. Jingyu shook her head slightly and said, It's just a change in color. When Xiaobai heard Jingyu's words, he helplessly shook his head. Then he looked at Jingyu and said, Mother, are you going to the Tokyo Imperial City? I'll give you a ride. Jingyu nodded slightly. She looked at Xiaobai's hesitant expression and smiled faintly. She raised her hand and patted Xiaobai's head and said, It's not that Mother doesn't want to take you with me, but right now, I can't protect you even if you follow me. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.